This is the Balanced Growth Show with Dr. Travis Perry, helping successful business professionals like you achieve balance in their lives.
Welcome to another episode of the Balanced Growth Show. I'm your host, Dr. Travis Perry. Today we have with us Stephen King. Stephen is a CPA who actually knew he wanted to be an accountant since he was 12 years old. He went from working with Ernst & Young to Amnesty International to help them manage the growth from 6 million to 18 million. He started the first virtual accounting firm called Virtual Growth. Now he runs the firm GrowthForce, which is an outsourced accounting department for service-based businesses and nonprofit firms. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thanks, Travis. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. You have a fantastic story, and we've been able to talk in the pre-show and with our team about what you've done through your life. And quite honestly, it's a great balance growth story. And we really want to emphasize this, but I'll let you tell it in your own words. You were 12 years old and here you are with such incredible success and growth in the accounting world. Tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Well, the 12-year-old is the result of being the son of two Irish immigrants. My parents are off the boat. My dad was an accountant for a car business, and he had a little side hustle in our basement in Flushing, Queens, where we grew up. And when you are the eldest son in an Irish family, the eldest son inherits the farm. And in our house, the farm was this tax practice that my dad had. And so I was down in the basement working on adding up checks manually as an indentured unpaid servant. And I found I really liked it. One, I got to be close with my dad and I was adding value. And my mother told me, get downstairs and help your dad. And I wanted to make her happy. But I was good at it. And he was showing me things. And I really found that I had a natural inclination. And then, when high school came and I wasn't the greatest high school student, needed to get it, figure out what I wanted to do. I learned that if you become an accountant, you'll always have a job, even in a recession. And if you could be an accountant and do whatever you want. And I was like, okay, great. I want to be a rock and roll accountant. So I set my path off to do that. And along the way, my dad became the controller of the car dealership. The owner of the dealership died. And General Motors funded them to help actually buy the dealership because we had no money. And I saw how the quality of life changed when you go from being an employee to being an owner of a small business. I thought, okay, I'm going to own a business. But I'm going to own a business that allows me to be able to do the things that, I didn't get a chance to do. I wanted to, my dad was traveling a lot, going around and auditing for General Motors into the early days. And I thought, I'm going to have a business that'll give me the time to coach my kids' sports and be engaged and not have to get on the Long Island Railroad and commute into the city every day. And I didn't want to live that life. So when I left Amnesty International, and I left there because in 1995, I was in charge of technology and I was at Ernst & Young where I was a consultant on accounting systems. I saw that Netscape 1.0 was the first commercially available browser. And that was a wide area network that I could use for this idea of building an outsourced accounting business. And so we started it and became the largest outsourced accounting business in the United States and in the serving .coms, web developers, software and marketing agencies. And I turned around one day and I realized that my life was miserable. I was getting on a JetBlue flight out of JFK every Monday morning, flying around to our 7 cities every week, helping close sales, and then flying back on the red eye on Thursday night to run a leadership team meeting every Friday morning, coming in on Saturday with my 2 young kids and catching up on work, and then just crashing and burning and sleeping all day Sunday. And I thought, how did I get here? How did this happen? My vision for what I wanted got lost. And while we were having a lot of commercial success, the quality of life was miserable. And I enjoyed the the venture capital game and learning from them. And I really love being part of that .com excitement, and being the leading outsourced accounting business. But it wasn't at the expense of my quality of life and my family and my young children. And so I got a chance to come to Kingwood, Texas, and I worked with Paul Savardi, who was the CEO and founder of Insperity, a $4 billion outsourced HR company. And he said to me one day, "You New Yorkers, you live to work. You need to come down to Texas here and I'll teach you how to work to live." And that phrase stuck with me. Live to work is exactly what I was doing. As a son of hardworking immigrants, we got a lot of our value from our accomplishments. Making the list and feeling good about checking them off each day. And the more you could check off, the better you felt. But I started here coming down and living here in Texas, and the culture here in the South is so much more focused on the family that I thought I get another shot, another bite at the apple when I started GrowthForce to create something that really fits the dream. And instead of focusing on trying to do an IPO or raise another $10 million of capital, let's focus on what really matters, which is living in balance. And I created a process to live a purposeful life, right? How can, Stephen Covey and the, 5 Habits of Highly Effective People, at your funeral, what do you want to say? What I wanted to say, as a service person, that means I'm a servant. I like to serve. I get great joy from serving others. What I realized was what I really loved was helping small businesses and nonprofits achieve their visions and achieve their outcomes. And that's what I was passionate about. And I focused on, how do I make GrowthForce a company that can do that while still helping me achieve the bigger why? And for me, the why was, number one, being present in my family for my wife and my 2 kids, being a home every day for dinner, and being engaged in our community and our neighborhood and the church and the sports teams that my kids were involved in. And so I realized that what I had to do is start with, Brian Tracy. While at Amnesty International, I took a cassette tape course. There were 10 cassette tapes that I would listen to when I drive into New York, that talked about how to live a meaningful life. And so it started with, what are my priorities? And I ended up going through this time exercise. I'm an accountant, right? So it's, I look at numbers and data and work backwards from the data to make decisions. That's our whole business model, is about that. And Brian Tracy's program, he's like, okay, there's only 8 hours, there's only 24 hours in a day. You need 8 of those hours to sleep. And I'm really religious about sleep. I mean, there's like at 10:30, I'm in bed. Doesn't matter if there's a party going on outside. And at 6:30, I don't get out of bed until it's 6:30, because I know how good I feel when I get my sleep. But then you got to look at what's the other, the 5 S's, right? The shower, shave, shampoo, get a clean shirt. That takes 2 hours a day. And that leaves you 14 hours for everything else. And I thought to my model was, how do I fill this with the things that are going to be meaningful for the end of my lifetime? And how does work fit into that plan? If I want to work to live, thank you, Paul, then let me figure out what living means, right? What does that actually translate into? And I remember, when I would talk about work-life balance in New York, a lot of the people would say, I don't really care about, I'm career oriented. Right. I want to make a lot of money, right? I don't mind working a 12-hour day because I don't have kids, and this is not where I am at this stage of my life. So I realized that the model for our staff, for our employees, had to be generic enough for them to have their priorities drive how work fits into the plan. And when I do this, I did this as a workshop at Scaling New Heights. Joe Woodard invited me a couple of years, thank you, Joe, to go do this. You know, when I surveyed the rooms, and, you know, we'd get hundreds of people coming back. And what I loved was when they come back the second year and say how we changed their life, I would ask a priorities exercise and say, look, there's 4 things that you can do with your life. You can work, you can focus on your family, focus on your health, or give back to the community. So where do you rank those 4? And universally, what I found was that people would put work first, family second, health third, and community was, maybe if there's time. But what I challenge my colleagues to say, what if it was health first?
Right.
And then family second, and then work is third.
Yeah.
And then how can you be intentional about giving back to the community? You know, the Irish community in Queens, my Uncle Jerry and Aunt Bridie are always raising money for somebody who's sick and doesn't have, insurance to cover. And that sense of community, going out there and selling raffle tickets at the Columban Fathers for people in a faraway land, was embedded into our brains as 8-year-olds. But you have to be intentional about it. So if you put health and family first, then you can be sure that that's what gets accomplished. So from my mind, and it took years, maybe even decades for me to figure this out, health is complex. Health is not just, I got to eat right. I got to exercise. I got to, have, downtime. For me, what I've realized is health has 3 parts: mental health, spiritual health, physical health.
That's right. Yeah. And, as I've done these exercises myself, I have 10 areas, and you hit 4, I call 4 major categories. Because work, you have career and finances. Health it's physical, it's mental, it's spiritual. Family, well, that's you and your spouse, it's you and your kids, it's extended family, and there's community, right? And all these areas I talk about in my book, Achieving Balance. The priority exercise that we do helps people. So it's really interesting how, Covey, Brian Tracy, all, these thought leaders that have influenced you have influenced me. And while our processes are slightly different, you come to the same conclusion that most people I have found, Stephen, have dealt with. And I do this in front of, 500 person crowds. I ask them what are their highest priorities. Once I break it down, most of the time it's health and family, according to your, to your categories. It's usually physical and spiritual, and family and spouse. Those are their top priorities. And what we've discovered is those are the areas that oftentimes, even though they believe are so important, they don't spend a lot of time actually there, or as much time as they think they are. Right. So for you, I know you've had this big transition. You've had a transformation, and part of it is you made a move, like with business. Physically, you moved your family and you had a different cultural experience, and you wanted to create that culture with your own business. So you guys have grown. You've scaled this business. You've done incredibly well. As you've scaled, what's helped you to now keep that balance? As you've grown this business, what is it that you've done internally with your culture or you personally that's allowed you to keep both the success that you've had at work, but also the success at life?
I love the cover of your book, Achieving Balance, has a seesaw on it, right? Because I don't always do it. But what happens is when I get out of balance, I know that I have how to get back into balance. And the way I do it is, if you're really talking about time exercise, right? the best way for me to do it is to manage the calendar. And so what I've learned to do, I think there's one thing on the health that I would add to your physical and spiritual, which is, I think, the most important by far is the mental health. And, we are very, as a culture, is just starting to talk about that more openly. But I think you have to use the calendar to say, I need to schedule for my mental health, my physical health, my spiritual health, and then schedule the time for my family, and then work your work time around that. I go to the gym every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday religiously, and it's on my calendar. And I have to leave the office on Wednesdays, because we're hybrid, so we're in the office on Tuesdays, Wednesdays at 4:30 to get there by 5. And everybody knows Steve's gone at 4:30. Now, I'm going to get back on the computer when I'm done at 6:30 to catch up for an hour or two on the stuff I missed. But that flexibility, if you have flexibility in your job, it allows you to make the health your highest priority. And I don't know how else to say it, but you as a leader have to help not only encourage your direct reports to figure out what that means for them, because it's different for every person, but I like being an accountability partner with my reports. Did you get to the gym? I ask that question all the time. And when I see somebody getting to the gym, it's like, yay, look at you. Awesome. Have fun. Good. And I think that makes a big difference, is starting the calendar with, there's 14 hours a day for every day else. Put the mental, physical, and spiritual health first, put the family in there second, and then work your work time around that.
Love it. Yeah. And what you said there is crucial. We talk about accountability at the end of the book. You need accountability at home. But if you have an environment where you have team members and others who report to you, et cetera, you need the accountability at work. I hear this a lot from what I call balanced leaders, and you're a balanced leader. You're helping your whole company culture to have a different experience, right? And you don't have to move states to do that. You can create a better mental state, a better expectation at work, that you're going to talk about personal things, that you're going to be able to help them with their goals. I've found in the research I've done on, balanced leaders, that they often have discussions about what their personal goals are and their business goals. And that is so important. So I really appreciate you bringing up that point. Now, we all have Achilles heels. I love that you mentioned, hey, when I get out of balance, it's important to, recenter myself, re-get in that groove, which I talk about this all the time. I was on an airplane yesterday. There's an autopilot for a reason. If we were left to just be controlled, we'd be all the time, we'd be, course correcting throughout the entire flight. But commercial aircraft can have the autopilot button, right? Flying in my dad's Mooney, we were bumping up and down and going all over the place. And he's like, the most important thing, Trav, smash, is like, we're heading for that mountain, but we're not on track. Like 90% of the time, we're constantly correcting. So while I set the course, will you just keep us on track? And here's the compass, and here's where we need to go. And that was it. Like, my job as co-pilot was just to make sure we're on track. Yep, we're still tracking, Dad. And I think that's the point, that we're not balanced 100% of the time. I'm balanced, man. I'm not balanced 100% of the time. I'm always checking this, but I have a plan. And that's, I think, the important part that you mentioned is you put it in the calendar. It goes in your ideal calendar. I love that.
And into the plan, we are coming out of a period this last year where we, as a leadership team, have been out of balance.
Yeah.
And we acknowledge that. It's like, okay, this is not our desired state. This is not okay. And there are only 3 things that you can do to get back to your balanced state. You can add more resources, which sometimes that's an option. You can lower expectations, which is rarely an option. Or you can push out the deadlines, which is how we often will react. I literally had a conversation today about our plan, right? We're in the middle of doing our quarterly planning. And, one of the leaders was like, I want to get this, and this done. And it's like, okay, what is realistic? I do not want us to create a plan that will create a permanent state of stress. And the challenge is that when you hire high-performing leaders, we, myself included, naturally default to a workaholic tendency. Again, I get great satisfaction from the accomplishment. And I think, to your earlier point, when we're going through this great exercise. Gabby, our HR director, has implemented this GrowthForce University where we're going through career drivers on our learning platform and personality tests to help figure out what do you want to do. And when you start with the end in mind, where do I want to end up? Then the satisfaction doesn't come from just accomplishing things for the sake of accomplishing things, but accomplishing things to accomplish a long-term vision in your life. And then, one of our leaders wants to be us in this CGMA, but there hasn't been time. Well, my last conversation was, we've got to work backwards from that. Because not only does that align with our goals, GrowthForce is an outsourced accounting department, but we specialize in management accounting for small businesses and nonprofits. And CGMA stands for Certified Global Management Accountants. And so when we're doing our planning, which we'll be doing literally this afternoon, that's got to be in the plan. Because if you're not fulfilled personally, you're not going to achieve balance. You're not going to, all that other stuff becomes a hamster on a wheel. So
it's absolutely true. I've found, regardless of what one's priorities are, everyone has different priorities. And this is why I don't say, I don't have the 8 baby steps of balance. Like, I'm not a guy who's telling you what to do. I'm giving you the framework in my book, Achieving Balance. But what I love is that once you know what those priorities are, it's all on you. Like, you can be proactive about it and decide when I'm going to schedule this. What am I going to do? I love that you talked about this is a very big issue with hiring high performance individuals. You want great people working for you. But I was talking to a business owner just yesterday who said, hey, a lot of people, even if they don't say I'm an overworking workaholic, they'll take their work home and they'll work secretively about it and won't report it because they're just so addicted to the accomplishment. They love that feeling. But what you nailed there was that when you have that same personal accomplishment for other areas in your life, that's the balance. I call those boundaries. Those are the boundaries that keep you from becoming what we call a productive workaholic. This has been a fun conversation, Stephen. I know you do a lot of great work with GrowthForce, with helping business owners and firms really to outsource something that, quite honestly, we could spend a whole hour on, of like how you do this and what you do. But give us just a 30-second, 60-second overview of what GrowthForce actually does to help other business owners have balance.
Well, you can't have that living in balance if you don't have profits. And most business owners think they can sell their way to profits. And what I've learned over doing this for 36 years is, first, you have to focus on pricing. Getting your pricing right is the single most important decision every business will make. And right now, in this time of rapid wage inflations, we've had 20% increases in wages in knowledge workers in the last 3 years. And in the prior 35 years, it was only 17% increase in wages. And so almost all of our clients are focusing on, how do I get a handle around these rising costs of salaries? I have to contribute more to health insurance. I have to contribute more to 401ks. And so what we do is shine a light on what those real costs are so that you can, and then a methodology to work backwards from profits and your profit goal to figure out how much do I need to price so that my gross profit creates net profit. And that's really the big driver for why I called it GrowthForce and not Stephen King CPAs. On the nonprofit side, which is we do about a third of our clients are nonprofits, it's helping them understand, how do you raise more money? How do you show the donor the tangible result of their gift from management accounting? And it's all QuickBooks. We're gurus in QuickBooks. And our clients get a dedicated team. They get an advisor who can help them understand how to read and interpret the results and teach them how to read and interpret the results and make data-driven decisions. And then a staff and a bookkeeper to do whatever work that they don't want to do themselves.
Fantastic. I love it. We could talk a lot about that. And I want to have you back on the show so we can do that at some point. It's been a fantastic conversation. If you're out there and you're listening and you've been a fly on the wall, listening to Stephen and I talk about this, Stephen, I can't endorse, what you do more heavily on the balance side, because we have so much in line there, and you're a balance leader. I appreciate you being on the show and your contribution. If listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Well, you can stop by and listen to our podcast for business leaders, Path to Profits, at GrowthForce, GrowthForce, force.com/podcast, and hear lessons that I've learned and our guests have learned from growth-oriented businesses and their leaders who have scaled their business, and how to have that profit so that they can invest themselves. Or you can email me, Stephen, STEPHEN, at growthforce.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Stephen King CPA, and Twitter, Stephen King CPA.
Love it. Thanks for being on the show. Thank you for listening. We appreciate your support of the show, and your reviews and your comments are always welcome. And until next time, remember, live life on purpose.